there will be no real non-controlled currency in the world.
We're coming for you, banks.
Increasing the block size to 32 megabytes right now. What would be the top 5 arguments that would get hurled against me?
Oh, that's a good one.
There are a few that the big blockers got right.
Ching, like all these coins splash into the wallets of all the winners. I love that.
There's a new threat out there. It's crypto.
Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast, following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency. This is episode number 132, CashScript XO.cash, featuring Mathieu Geukens. The day is Saturday, the 5th of October, 2024. I'm your host, Jeremy. Jet is doing the producing. Quick check on the price. USD $323.83 for 100 megasats, slightly down. 1 BTC sat buys 192 BCH sat, so it's slightly down, and 1 ETH buys 748.6 megasats, so we're up slightly there. BTC having a pretty good week. It's at about 58% dominance, so really killing it in the market. But our guest today is a BCH all-star, one of the contributors to CashScript and also author of Cashonize, Tokenaut, and various other projects. In fact, so many that he's not able to kick them all off at once. He was last on the show, episode 106 in February, and was also on stage giving the keynote at Bliss. Did a fantastic job of that. Thank you. Welcome back to the show, Mathieu. How you been recently? What's the latest with you?
Yeah, hello. Super glad to be on. Been looking forward to this episodes. And also thanks for the introduction. Indeed, those are the 3 most important things I work on. I have on GitHub a variety of small tools and things people can use. So if you're interested in that, you can find the full list there. Some of them are really small helper tools, or maybe programs to do, for example, an airdrop or things like that. CashScript, Cashonize, and Tokenaut, those have been taking also up the majority of my time this year. So excited to talk about those.
And you're full-time on all that at the moment, right? You're not also, studying or working for someone else or doing consulting or anything like that?
No, full-time independent Bitcoin Cash developer.
Gosh,
so, glad to be able to glad to be able to say that.
And how are you feeling about BCH just recently? We were talking about on that last episode, 106, we talked about the history, and you would have been writing up some yearly reviews and so forth. That was February, start of the year. I didn't actually go back and check. Did we make any predictions for this year? I think we probably would have said that DeFi would be starting to kick off on BCH, right? And maybe that's starting to come true. But how are you feeling now? We're in the latter half of the year rather than the start.
Yeah, especially the last few weeks have been very excited about new chips. And also I've been reading the statements rolling in about the VM limits and the BigInts. So those were 2 topics we kind of discussed at Bliss. More so the VM limits, but the BigInts wasn't like a top of mind. I think it was more in the research phase still. So now we finally have the statements rolling in, and people being very positive and being very impressed also about the testing and the way it is being rolled out and finalized, and how the rationale sections and the summary. So technically that's looks super good. And indeed for all DeFi projects, this is very promising, because then they can much more easily write their smart contracts without, for example, running into limits. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that in a bit, about the VM limits and stuff.
Yeah. No, it's been probably a pretty good year for BCH, I'd say, so far. I don't know that we've had any overwhelming moment of holy crap, it's happening. That hasn't happened. But just quietly, the narrative has been shifting in our favor. Hijacking Bitcoin came out, made a huge difference. Things have been progressing really nicely within the community. We got the BCH Argentina conference coming up next week. Are you going to that, or I guess not? But yeah,
no. I would love to, but I'm not able to go.
it's a long way away, isn't it? But I was just thinking about this recently, though. It's an amazing sign that we're getting to the, things are ramping up to the point that there's so many conferences that people can't go to all of them, right? Like 2 years ago, there wasn't the case. There was only one conference, and then before that, there was maybe no conference. So now we've got multiple in different parts of the world, and maybe next year it might be even more. So it's really kicking off, right?
Yeah, definitely. Looking back at the year, I would say Bliss was definitely a highlight. Meeting everyone there, it's different when you get to meet in person. And also, very good discussion, many ideas. People, with project ideas wanted to take more initiative, get more involved. So, those were awesome vibes. And I feel that, people afterwards mainly went back to work because diving into actually starting those projects or starting those initiatives. And of course, if you have an idea for example, a DeFi project that isn't built in even a week or a month, so those results, even though I think some of them took place at Bliss or shortly after Bliss, the results will only be seen much later or compound over time.
Yeah, it's amazing how much getting in the room physically with people can make a difference, because there was quite a lot of people that I had talked to on the show, maybe even several times, that I've talked to a lot, and I know, a good amount about them. Like I would say, we were friends and all that, but then, you meet them in person. It really does a lot to kind of cement that connection that you have, and to really think that there's somebody on the other end. It doesn't feel so disconnected as like, oh, okay, somewhere in the world somebody is writing this code or doing this project or whatever. It's like, no, this is a living, breathing person that's waking up every day, and they're dealing with a lot of other stuff in their life, but they're here and they're committed to BCH. So for anybody who hasn't been to any of the bigger BCH events, I highly recommend it, because it will really change your perspective. Even if you logically know, okay, this is a grassroots revolution kind of thing, once you meet people and shake their hand and stuff, you really feel like, damn, this is making a difference. This is a real thing. Okay, let's crack straight into it then. So starting with CashScript, which is kind of, I guess from my point of view, maybe it's sort of like your main project. I know it's a little bit less than maybe Cashonize gets the most updates, if I had to guess, but CashScript seems to be like the key linchpin of everything that's going on. Can you just walk everyone through it for people who are not as familiar? You gave a demo actually at Bliss, which was probably one of the most popular parts of the event, which, using CashScript. So for people who don't know, who aren't developers or whatever, just explain what it is and how it works.
Oh yeah, of course. So first of all, Bitcoin has a programming language, often just called Bitcoin script. So it's a scripting language. It's hard to work with. So people compare it to assemblies or a very low level computing language. And this, if you look at Ethereum for similarities, there they also have like an assembly-like programming language with opcodes, but nobody programs in this directly. They all use Solidity or Viper. So those are high-level programming languages. So they abstract a lot of the difficulties and they compile down to these lower-level opcodes. So they're compiled languages. And CashScript is similar, but then for Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash. So we have, in the beginning, it was mostly similar. So before all the smart contract upgrades like native introspection and the cash tokens upgrade, but more and more, it's a totally different world. So the BTC virtual machine hasn't had any of the programmability extensions that you would need to, for example, write covenants. And it's now becoming a big topic of discussion in BTC. But so for Bitcoin Cash, you could either have the option to write this low-level script by hand, and there's now some tools like the Bit.ly IDE, but for most developers, they will want, similar to Solidity, they want a high-level programming language. So I would say CashScript is the Solidity for BCH. So it abstracts many difficulties away, and it gives you a syntax that will seem familiar to you, especially if you know like JavaScript or Java, any language which just uses braces and functions and variable names. Whereas with opcodes, this does not exist. You need to think about like a stack, kind of like a pyramid where you push and pop things from this layered stack. So it's a very different mental model, and this is all abstracted away. And so TypeScript also it's a compiler, as we talked about, but it's also a toolkit, so an SDK, a software development kit. And this is written in TypeScript, so it gives you type safety, and so it will be easy to work with for any JavaScript or TypeScript developers. So that's kind of the high-level overview.
So can you just walk me through then for, let's just say in detail so that people understand, you kind of have the nodes, right? So you have like BCHN is written, and then at least in my mental model, then you have maybe like libauth is sitting on top of that. Is CashScript on top of libauth? Is that?
Yeah, so the main dependency from CashScript is indeed libauth. So it's mainly using libauth tooling to construct clever transactions. But if you think about the layers in the network stack or in the software stack, then you
have
indeed
the fulcrum stuff as well.
Yeah, indeed, you need to have the indexers. It's very, very important. So indeed, the full nodes that are at the bottom with the peer-to-peer layer and the direct messaging, and this is of course the most censorship resistant and distributed all over the world. Then you have the indexers. So some projects need to run their own dedicated indexers, but you also have public instances, and these are the Electrum indexers and Fulcrum, and recently ChainGraph. And there has also been BCHD, which is a chronic-based indexer. So there is some exploration still going on for the indexers. So it's actually a rapidly developing layer, I would say. Still this indexer layer, and then you get to the application layer, and then libauth is the most basic or low-level library for JavaScript, and then CashScript is built on top of that. But then, of course, you still need other pieces, so you need to integrate with wallets somehow. So currently, we have seen more and more dApps using Wallet Connect, and this is another piece of the stack. You'd need to have a full app. And I think those are the important layers. And then the wallets at the very top, the user level. Yes. And then you want the best compatibility between the wallet layer and your app layer. And for example, some apps like BCH Bull, they manage to be compatible with all wallets. But if you use something like a BIP21, like special parameters in your addresses, or you want to use Wallet Connect, those are only supported by a subset of wallets. So then you also need to inform your users, if you need to download one of these wallets, or you need to switch, kind of, because not all wallets support the new features. And we see this with cash tokens, so not all multi-coin wallets will do all the hard work to integrate this. So it's a bit... that's also why the first project I made was a website to filter which wallets have which features. That's still in maintenance mode, so I still update, like if a wallet adds something, then you can still filter it down. And one thing why that was the reason for me to get started with that project is because if you would just look up best wallets Bitcoin Cash 2024 or something, you see a lot of like generic articles, pretty plain, probably also just copy pasted from other coins, but then they also use all multi-coin wallets. So none of the BCH specific features like sweeping private keys to when you scan a QR code, or maybe cash fusion or cash tokens, all these things we would get excited about. They're of course not in many of these multi-coin wallets. So it's good that we have some like grassroots dedicated websites to promoting the Bitcoin Cash focused wallets.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm digging into this a little bit is because I think from the outside, especially if you're not a developer or even you're not an expert in cryptocurrencies or anything, it can seem a bit opaque, like all what's going on in this tech stack, right? Because it's at so many different layers, and essentially every layer plugs into the layer both above and below it, right? And then that's how everything works. So I can just imagine some listeners would be thinking, okay, Jeremy has Jason Dreisner on and he's popping off explaining all this different stuff. And then you come on and you're talking about something like completely different, but to their point of view, it's like, okay, this is all just somewhere in the code that makes everything, work, right? So I think it's really good to get a sense of, okay, so it's like a layers on a cake, and you want to have every layer be as advanced as possible, and they kind of all need to develop together. It takes a lot of time to bake this kind of a cake, because if you just change the bottom layer, then it doesn't make any difference to the wallets and apps that people are actually using. But you need to get those changes in, and then that allows the indexes and stuff to get updated. So like Cash Tokens got in May 2023. Well, first it was research for many years, and then it was integrated in the protocol May 2023. And then it took a while for then people had to set up the indexes and stuff, which they did partly in the testing period. And then that then has to get up into libauth and into CashScript, and then the wallets have to integrate it. And so it just bleeds slowly up through the layers over a period of many years, which is why when you say that the BTC guys are now stuck, that people just don't really comprehend, especially within the BTC community, how far they are behind. Because it's not just a question of, do they have the base protocol level upgrades, which they don't, and they have no plan to really effectively get in, but the years that it takes at every level for that to then filter up to wallets and apps that people can actually use, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that's also why I think that indexers on BTC, they haven't been, probably Coinbase and stuff like big exchanges, they have their own custom built indexers. But for the application layer, like I've seen many BTC devs even be jealous of Fulcrum and some of the advances we have in BCH. And I don't think even they know about Chain Graph, because they would probably be even more impressed. But yeah, indeed, there needs to be a reason to develop these advanced indexers, right? And if there's no little application development going on, then then you will just see the exchange type of use cases take off. So I think indeed, there's ripple effects throughout the whole stack.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about CashScript. You're trying to raise a new flip starter. I didn't check this morning, but I checked yesterday. 89 out of 140 BCH, which is split three ways, partly to you, partly to Roscoe Callis, the other main contributor. And then you've also got a nice little 10 BCH in there for external contributors. So this is another element of software that people really need to appreciate, which is that ultimately software is just people, right? So it's not as simple as, okay, we have a good dev, and then that dev leaves the project, and so we just get another dev that's just as good, and it just plugs in one-to-one. It doesn't operate like that. And anybody who runs a company or has a technical team, there's a transition period. Somebody has to, even if they had the exact same skill set to begin with, which they often don't, then they need time to learn how to work with that specific project. Every code base is slightly different. There might be elements of it that they're unfamiliar with, or little traps that they've got to watch out for. If there's other people already working on the project, then they need to integrate, into what's the culture and the workflow, and how does code review operate and all that kind of stuff. So I wonder if you can also speak a little bit to that element of how CashScript goes. And it sounds like the pool of people is maybe going to start slowly expanding, bringing more people into the team there.
Yeah, so the main reason we also added these like contributor funds is because we already got some outside contributions. So for example, the plugin that you can use for VS Code to get syntax highlighting and auto completion, which is very nice, but it's maintained not by Roscoe or I, it's maintained by an external contributor. And also now we recently got a contribution to add some, it's a bit technical, but something, a nice way to add generic typings to artifacts. But this is something we want to integrate, and an outside contributor did a lot of this work, and so we want a way to also compensate them for their time, but also maybe then they can contribute again in the future, so it becomes more sustainable, because maybe it will not forever be like a two-person team or us two, like Roscoe and I. So by having this, it becomes more accessible for new developers to join, get interested. And what Pat did is Pat also contributed a big portion to CashScript last year, but he ran his own flip starter. So he kind of wanted to think about, okay, we don't want this per se to become the standard mode of operations. And this is why we reserved a portion for, to give to maintainers who, for example, do this plugin or who make commits and pull requests or fix bugs, so whatever contributions we might get. So that's kind of the thought process.
And so are we seeing a rising amount of development, do you think, in BCH? Like I've talked about on this show, if you're paying attention to the Telegram groups and so forth, like you can really feel things starting to ramp up with more and more people popping in and just they start with a couple of casual questions, and then a couple months later they say, hey guys, I've made this app and can you help me fix this, right? And then eventually becomes something, cool enough and developed enough that like they put out some sort of media about it, and then we talk about it on this show, and that's how these projects come up. So I'm starting to see that increasing traction, especially this year. I think relative to last year or the year before, not so much on that dev front, but now that we have more upgrades and the better tooling is always improving, it gets past a critical tipping point, right? And people start coming in. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, definitely. So I think if you would go back 2 years ago and go to the CashScript showcase page, that's kind of the well-known project that use CashScript, then it would just have AnyHedge. And so if you go back to the same page now, I think there's 9 projects listed. So you really, and these are projects you would recognize if you're active in the BCH scene, and some new additions like helpme.cash. But so the list of just things we can showcase, like this is using CashScript. If you think this is cool, like take a look at what powers it, take a look at CashScript and how you can get started. So I think that's one clear way you can definitely see people are starting to build more projects, but also the projects, they don't disappear overnight, right? So they become more sustainable. They find a real use case or their niche, and they exist over time. And they also need to add features, because oftentimes, for example, with the case of FundMe, there's many feature requests. Like if you launch an app, the main thing that will happen first is people say everything that doesn't work yet if they try it out, because usually even if you do proper testing, you don't catch all the bugs, and especially not if you want to iterate quickly and launch pretty soon in the development cycle. And then the feature requests start. So it's definitely not a thing of launching and be done with it. It's like then the work starts.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. When we talked about that different software stack with the different layers, people can think about that. It's kind of like an inverse pyramid, right? So at the bottom, well, I mean, it can work both ways, right? Maybe a pyramid's not the best way to think about it. But the point is with the different layers, so the technology kind of flows up the stack, which is that the upgrades first have to get into the protocol, and then each ascending layer can build on that. But I want to make a quick point that there's also the economics, which flows in the reverse direction, because one of the contributions to your Flipstarter so far, I said you've got 89 BCH. The top contributor is General Protocols with 46.83 BCH. So they put a massive amount of funding into this. And then shout out also to Marcelo, who put 35 BCH in as well. But the point there is that BCH Bull is more like the app that people are familiar with. So the money to the BCH industry, or to any crypto, but BCH in this case, comes in at the top from consumers at that app layer. And then it's the responsibility of the app layer people and the wallet layer people, to then push funding down into the technical infrastructure that supports everything. Mostly, consumers are not going to care about these kind of infrastructure projects or whatever, right? So it's up to the teams in the community that use those tools and value it, then have to push the money down to keep this whole system running, right?
Yeah, and it's a difficult thing in software. There's memes about this, that everything depends on some software that a guy in Nebraska maintains or something. But sometimes even developers, they use a lot of dependencies, and your users are definitely not aware of what's happening under the hood. But sometimes even developers, even the libraries you use, in turn, they use more libraries, so it's a bit turtles all the way down. But these pieces are important, so they need to be maintained, funded. If there's an upgrade at the base layer, this needs to, as you said, propagate through the stack. So for example, with the VM limits chip, this is one thing we mentioned in the Flipstarter. Of course, we want to support the VM limits on ChipNet as soon as possible, so that developers can start working on their applications and testing and playing around with it. But so, of course, integrating this doesn't happen automatically, so we need to dedicate time for this. Also do testing on our part, so it's the CashScript library is working. So yeah, I think you kind of nailed it, that the upgrades come from the network layer and then propagate up, and the funding needs to kind of go in the reverse direction, because yeah, everything is kind of public goods. Even the nodes, they need some kind of external funding. They're not usually not funded by the protocol. So the money is mainly made in the app layer and in the investors, or the BCH holders, and the money needs to, from the top, needs to find its way down, or businesses needs to support a lower layer. So indeed, a shout out to all the Flipstarter supporters. I think even you also, Jeremy, with the BCH podcast chipped in. So thanks a lot for that. And I'm excited for the work we laid out in the CashScript Flipstarter also. So if people are interested, you can find it at flipstarter.cashscript.org. And so the big items are to make it easier for developers to build dApps. So using these new features added in the new chips, like the VM limits and the BigInts, but also improving the debug tooling, improving the typing support. And then we have a list of minor things we also want to add, but together they make a big impact on the developer experience.
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, I put in some sats into this Flipstarter, and the reason I'm making a big point about it on this show is because obviously I know people in the ecosystem are going to be listening. And if you are running any kind of business or contributions or whatever, you're heavily involved in BCH, it's just to put it on the top of people's awareness, because like you said, people don't always necessarily know or appreciate the value of these things until you don't have them. Basically, it's one thing I posted on Twitter a little while ago, which is that maintaining the infrastructure for a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin Cash, which includes the media infrastructure, the technical infrastructure, the community infrastructure, moderators to Telegram groups and all that kind of stuff, is extremely expensive, but it's still much cheaper than not having it. So I think everyone needs to be in that mindset of sort of reinvesting in the community, because if you're getting use out of BCH and you're spreading it to other people and so forth, the whole system doesn't work. Despite this whole 21 million people, some people think, again, it's that hodl mentality of, let me just get my coins and sit on my coins and then that's it, I'm done. But it doesn't really work like that. Your coins only retain value if the community is growing, and the economics is accelerating of the economy within the coin, and that only happens from money actually being put into the infrastructure layer. So it's really just a positive sum game, but you need to see it through that lens to really appreciate the value of how things go. Yeah. All right, cool. So this is looking pretty good. You've got one more week for people to contribute to this?
Yes.
Expires in 9 days, right?
Yes.
And still needing 50 BCH. So if you're getting inspired by this potential for funding BCH infrastructure, you can go to flipstarter.cashscript, CashScript.org, and chuck in some sats. So you're still using the Flipstarter. You didn't go with fundme.cash like I did. Any thoughts on that?
The main reason is because Flipstarter has worked well for us. So our main contributors like General Protocols, so they are kind of used to it. So and with Flipstarter and Electron Cash, they work well together. So otherwise, because Electron Cash doesn't support Wallet Connect, you would have to tell people, download this other wallet, then send your balance first over to yourself to this Wallet Connect supporting wallet, and then do this other step. So for now, for this year at least, for this Flipstarter, we decided that this would be the easiest also on our end to set up, and because then it's hosted on our infrastructure, so we would be sure that it's reliable. But maybe for next year, definitely, it also depends a bit on how everything plays out with the Wallet Connect supporting wallets, and also with the users. So if there's more, if users say, I imagine this will be the case, right? That people say, oh, why do I need to download this weird Electron Cash plugin that asks for a lot of permissions? All other dApps use this wallet connect thing. Why are you guys so weird? So once we see this kind of sentiment, then of course we would immediately switch over. But it's still a bit in the early phases. So yeah, that's the little process.
Yeah, it was very noticeable to me that we did the FundMe and there was still some messing about, because some people hadn't tried it before, so it was the first experience for them. But nobody said, "Oh, why don't you just use Electron Cash? Still use like the Flipstarter plugin. Like, oh, that was so much better." Literally nobody said that, and we ended up with 35 contributors, which is a lot.
Yeah, which is a lot.
That's a good spread. And a lot of people put in like some very small amounts that even with the Flipstarter, you can put a small amount, but it's a sliding scale based on how much money is still left in it. And there's kind of a cap and, it's kind of a pain in the ass. Whereas with the FundMe, I was really impressed that we got so many contributors. And I think, even as the tooling gets better, as it gets integrated into more wallets, and this is a long way away, so don't hold me to it, but I would love it if Celine just had a page which was just community funding initiatives embedded right there in the app, and you could just go on there and literally whatever you wanted in there, it would be like a menu. Whatever you wanted in the ecosystem, you could just say, bam, fund these guys this much, bang, straight out of your wallet, and then you just sprinkle out some coins to whatever you want to see funded, and then we would have like that's just an economy. It would just be the decentralized demand driving whatever features and products got made. It would be amazing, right?
Yeah, it would be a cool feature to see integrated, definitely.
So we'll see, but no promises about that. That might be a long way off. Okay, so you're not just doing CashScript, you got Tokenaut, and you've got a bunch of other stuff, Cashonize, like we mentioned before, Ninjas.cash, your BCMR generator. Walk me through what else you've been working on in the BCH ecosystem.
Yeah, so those are the main ones. And as I said, the best Bitcoin Cash wallets. So this was my first project. But then essentially Tokenaut was started in the same vein. So there wasn't really a website which just clearly listed, oh, these are the kind of the recent Bitcoin Cash DeFi projects. So these are the kind of dApps that we have. So there wasn't really an overview. So I thought, okay, there's an opportunity for me to create an easy, simple, informative website. And then later I expanded it with some live statistics that it fetches from the different sources. And it also has like an NFT page where it shows how many NFTs have been minted from the different projects and how much total revenue this created for the different projects and the floor price from TapSwap. So it kind of grew in scope, but I'm glad with Tokenaut specifically that there's this one stop where you can just go around. And now I added filters. So if you just want to see all wallet connects, dApps, for example, you can filter it down. And also I keep kind of discovering new dApps. So for example, recently I added the Satoshi Dice, which is now branded as a dApp, but also it uses this trustless mechanism because it posts verifiable proof, I think each day or something. So you can be sure that the odds are not gamed or whatever. Or people could be verifiably posting the proof and raising the alarm. So yeah, I think that's really cool to have these trustless apps, and then that people can just see them all, even the older ones like Mecenas or the Lisho's Last Will, or there's a couple of these Electron Cash plugins, which are, by today's standards are like the very first generation of smart contracts apps on BCH. So we have evolved quite a bit since then. But if people still want to use this, you can just download the plugin and they still work. So that's the nice thing to have one overview. I think it has 25 dApps on the dApps page. So it's a nice number and counting. So every month there's new dApps being added and being launched. So
do you have a favorite? What's if you were going to pick? BCH Bull, Flipstarter, Cauldron, BCH Guru are the top ones.
I do like the Cauldron DEX a lot. Because I've been trying to push this cash tokens ecosystem with Cashonize and the first wallet. So once there was a DEX that was huge, And then when they integrated Wallet Connect, the integration was even nicer. So yeah, I like the Cauldron DEX a lot, but all of these are cool, and I've tested all of them, I think. So
Yeah, shout out to the Cauldron guys, doing an absolutely amazing job. So tell me then, what actually constitutes a DeFi app in your, is there a definition? Can't see one written here anywhere on the site, because I feel like a fifth of gaming, which is one of my particular favorites, I kind of want to get that some extra publicity going on, but I can see that there might be an argument that in its pure form, where it's the gaming tournaments and you're just paying Bitcoin Cash to Bitcoin Cash, that's not strictly speaking DeFi. It's DeFi in the sense that you're using a decentralized currency, but it's not DeFi in the sense of like trading tokens or doing any advanced contracts or anything like that. But then it's over time, it's kind of maybe going to sneak in there, because now they've launched their own AFOG token, which you can trade on Cauldron. So like, at what point is DeFi?
yeah, I do think there's no real clear definition, but in Tokenaut, I try to separate it in two categories. So I have the DeFi page, which is like Cauldron, where you can do yield farming, or like BCH Bull, so really more finance type applications. And then I have dApps. So dApps is the term used in the wider cryptocurrency. So they're not really decentralized apps per se, because many have a centralized website where you go to. And so that part isn't really decentralized, but it's more so that they're trust minimized. So for example, with the Satoshi Dice example, they post verifiable proofs, and in other, like I would assume in many gambling websites, they can just cheat the odds and lie about what their code is doing, and you really have no clue. But this is using blockchain in a clever way to have these verifiable proofs. Or for example, if you would have a service which puts hashes on the blockchain to timestamp them. I think we had such a service in the past by bitcoin.com. So this would also be, to me, trustless, because yeah, these are just timestamping hashes from documents. And so for me, that constitutes a dApp. So anything that's either using smart contracts in a trustless or trust minimized way, or is using these clever types of transactions. For example, Flipstarter, it's not technically using smart contracts. It's not using CashScript or anything like that. It's a special way where people plug in their input to a collaborative transaction, and once the inputs add up to enough to cover the output amount, then the transaction becomes valid on the network and can be broadcasted. So yeah, there's also a filter where you can filter by either the smart contract, dApps, or the special transactions. So for example, Memo, the social media, which uses the blockchain mainly as the data storage, I would also say that's more like a dApp, because it uses the blockchain in a clever way to have like a data storage, but it's also not using smart contracts or anything like that. So the distinction is a bit fuzzy, and indeed, as you mentioned, a fifth of gaming might be moving a lot more in that direction. So I'll keep an eye out for that and everything they're up to. Yeah.
Yeah, well, because I was just looking at the list as well too, because then you also have in the DeFi page, one of the main sort of metrics, like a lot of things in life come down to metrics, what you focus on, what gets measured gets managed, right? So in a certain way, you can drive what you optimize for by what you choose to measure, because there's always a million things you could measure. Now, across the DeFi space, TVL, total value locked, is what everybody loves to talk about, right? Where they put all their money, they lock them into these contracts, and then the more money you have locked up, obviously, the better, right? And so the whole scene is often very preoccupied with who has the most TVL, which protocols, which chains, blah blah blah, right? But there's nuance within that, right? Because I could just make an app that just TVL, you just send in your coins, it doesn't do anything, but it's just locked in there, and then we're boosting the TVL. And then on the other hand, you can have all kinds of more advanced things incentivizing people to lock up their coins or whatever. So on the DeFi page, you've got here TVL with any hedge, so BCH Bull, Cauldron, and then BCH Guru. And then TapSwap makes the list, but it has an NA for TVL. And I'm expecting that in the future, we'll have like more, like Flipstarter, technically, you could say would have TVL kind of, maybe.
Yeah, Yeah, that's a bit difficult, like FundMe, because it's not strictly like cumulative, because every time a campaign gets finished or paid out, which is actually a success, it would go down. So it's a bit, yeah, it's not a general metric, but for these pools of funds, like the Cauldron pool, so it does make sense for some types of applications to manage TVL, measure TVL as the main metric. And also, as you said, it has become like the standard in DeFi. So if you go to DeFi Llama or anything of these wider cryptocurrency pages, you will also see these metrics. And I hope over time that we will not just have, of course, Tokenaut. I do know on DeFi Llama, there's already BCH Bull and Cauldron. So that's very cool to see these more widely adopted general multi-chain pages also ranking BCH. And then you can start comparing cross-chain, how good BCH is doing compared to, I don't know, Cardano or any of these Polkadot or any of the other chains close to us. Yeah, so I think it's good to have multiple sources, and some people have also suggested changes to how to have a list of dApps. But what I want to encourage people is Tokenaut should not be the only list, of course. It's the one I maintain, and I did my best to research and put together. But everyone else who feels this is like an important kind of thing to do, go ahead and create your own list or measurements or yeah, whatever. So yeah, that's clearly something that's valuable for people who want to do research, is that they have access to information.
Yeah, it's just something that's on my mind, which is that going forward, we need to be smarter. And I think there's been some trending in the right direction in terms of the metrics that the BCH community is putting out. Like I did with Celine, we have the daily user stats, which I keep an eye on. A Fifth of Gaming, again, they've got a whole stats page, and you can look up all kinds of stats about what they're doing. BCH Bull has been really good about publishing various stats around them. BCH Guru also made a stats dashboard. So, and this is all basically in the last year. So I've been really pleased to see that trend of stats starting to come up from individual projects. And then, yeah, like you say, we need some more aggregators that can sort of synthesize or combine or summarize the information in different ways, because the quality of your information is the quality of your decision making. So we should be very thoughtful, I think, about what we choose to focus on, getting the data for that, and then obviously you can improve and iterate from there. But if you pick the wrong thing, or you don't have any data at all, then you're just kind of stabbing around blindly, right? And I think we can improve our efficiency and our progress on the whole rise to global reserve currency thing massively if we're more attentive to that kind of stuff. I don't know, do you have any thoughts about?
Yeah, so this reminds me of, I think on X, we had this conversation. I posted a few of my projects, and then I was thinking, how can I increase traffic? And you said, yeah, well, there doesn't seem to be much crossover yet between Cashonize and some of these others. And Tokenaut is, yeah, a good place to have information. So if people want to know what dApps can I use, this is the place to find them. So then I added Tokenaut to the Cashonize, my wallet, under the Wallet Connect tab. So if people want to connect to something, but imagine they don't know the different tabs they can connect to, they can take a look at Tokenaut. So then there is some kind of crossover, and it's also is a way to discover the ecosystem. So from an outsider who might not be familiar with all things BCH, then they have like one link they can click, and then they can start scrolling. Oh, fundraising, like a category fundraising, that seems interesting. Or maybe like a DEX, that might seem interesting. Or some people might be more interested in like gambling or predictions. Yeah, and then they can just scroll the categories and see. Or Cash Fusion, if they want privacy tools, they can scroll down the list, filter the categories based on their interested, and then just click whatever seems interesting, and then they can read more, for example, about Cash Fusion. So yeah, I think that's a good way to make it more discoverable, and also to have these kind of cross-pollination between the different projects. So yeah, that's what came to my mind when we talk about these stats, because yeah, this helps the stats both for my project Cashonize, but then also for Tokenaut. So yeah, that was a good suggestion that you made back then.
Yeah, the more integration we can do, definitely the better. So what's the latest with Cashonize then? I am actually a fairly regular Cashonize user, because I love that you can just open it up in the browser and it's just instantly there. But I know you've been working more on the desktop release, which I think maybe I installed it, but I can't say that I've used that in any great depth. And if the feature set is running ahead of the web version now, maybe, right, I would be unaware of that. But what's the game plan there? What's happening with Cashonize?
Yeah, so Cashonize had a flip starter in November of last year. And so I've been, for the first half of this year, mainly focusing on Cashonize. And now since, I think, 2 months, the new code base, so which was started from scratch with a proper foundation. So it's now using TypeScript and Vue, whereas before it was kind of an experimental hobby project which suddenly grew into a large code base, so it didn't have a solid foundation. So I restarted it with everything I learned over the way, because you cannot really do it perfect the first time around if you don't have the necessary experience. So I gained the experience, asked around of how I would restart on a solid foundation, and then now, if you go to the web version, it is the same feature set as is available on the desktop or the mobile version, but now it's available cross-platform with one code base. So it becomes very maintainable for even one developer to have an Android APK and a desktop version through Electron, and also a web application. So I think it's really nice that it becomes cross-platform and also much more maintainable. So the old code base, as they say, it became kind of a spaghetti code base. So it's easy to break something, and it's hard, even when you yourself as the developer are out it for a little while, to jump back into it because the code wasn't like split up in a logical and easy to maintain way. So this became the priority for with the flip starter of last year, and then I got funded. So I'm very grateful to everyone who contributed to that. And now the new code is pretty much finished, still working on a release for the Play Store, and then I can do the full announcement that all the deliverables have been completed. So this is still the one box. And actually, Callisti is helping me with that, because the Play Store process is a little bit of a hurdle with some administrative processes.
Amazing. You love to hear that. And I've been so pleased that the wallet ecosystem for BCH has been also just advancing so rapidly. You know, all these, we talk about these cake, every layer of it right now, I feel like is just rocketing forward in comparison to 1 year ago, and especially 2 years ago. The BCH wallet scene is absolutely thriving, and I'm thrilled to hear. So you're collaborating with Callisti there. I know that there's like that's the amazing thing about the BCH scene. Like, everybody is on the same team, right? We all benefit if all BCH gets better. And so there's not been really any fighting or contention among like the wallets that are even direct competitors, and they're actually are helping each other out, which is such an amazing dynamic to see. I don't know that you would see, like, it's the whole magic of the Bitcoin 21 million, right? Is that everybody's on the same team, right?
Yeah, so to speak to that, for example, Jomar with Peitaka, they also helped me when I was building this foundation, because they recommended Quasar to me as an easy way to get cross-platform deployment through Capacitor. And Capacitor is also what Celine uses, I think, for web views, to have it easily integrated with mobile without needing Kotlin and iOS-specific Swift code bases. That you can just have one JavaScript code base or TypeScript code base, which devs are familiar with, and then you can have this cross-platform. So that was a great suggestion that helped me out in this way. And also now I know that Jim from General Protocols has been working on a scannable kind of scan and claim, similar to the bitcoin.com URLs, which you could claim and then get a little BCH. And then this was, of course, proprietary to bitcoin.com, but now there's an effort being made to integrate this into multiple of the actively maintained Bitcoin Cash wallets. So I think he has been working on the Saline front. He has reached out to me. I know he's also in a contact with the Peitaka guys. So that would be really cool if we can have this new feature, an open source way to do payment URLs, or not sure how to describe it, but you can claim from a URL, and this would be integrated.
The Stamps project,
Yeah. And if we can get this integrated into the multiple wallets, this also needs to be a collaborative effort, because it's not so nice if you send someone a link to give in BCH when he downloads his wallet, that it doesn't work with this wallet and this wallet. So it's nicer if it's a widely adopted standard.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. We have all these projects are starting to pop up kind of at the edge of, the scene is basically what happens. And then like it takes a little time. Again, so many things are just dependent on, it takes time to cook, but then it starts integrating into all the different pieces of the ecosystem. And before you know it, it just becomes sort of standard in the sense that everybody's just expected to have it and everybody has it. And if anybody wants to start a new wallet, they will first need to catch up to all the different things, so cash tokens is still not, super well supported, even though it's more than a year old, because there's just so many different priorities and everything's kind of going on at once. But you have like that, you have stamps. I mean, even some of the exchanges still only use the old legacy addresses. They don't even have the Bitcoin Cash addresses, right? So it's messy.
Yeah, so
but things do move forward, right?
This is one reason why I've been kind of pushing for the Wallet Connect standard, because this is one standard a wallet needs to adopt, and then it has access to all these dApps, and then there's no like special limit to, this new dApp cannot be supported, it needs special integration. No, it's supported by default. So because it's a standardized way of building constructing the transaction and interacting with smart contracts, I think this is very important. And of course, Wallet Connect is not perfect per se, so now we have also Cash Connect, so this is again two standards, but then at least either of these standards can not operate just on one specific dApp, but it is standardized and interoperable with any kind of new dApp that gets built.
So can you actually clarify this for me? I don't know. Does anything that worked in Wallet Connect also work in Cash Connect, or do you need to do Cash, like if an app works with Wallet Connect because Cash Connect is more advanced, will it always be able to
so unfortunately it's really two different standards. So BCH Guru is the main app which is using Cash Connect, and maybe something like an IDE that Jim also was using, I think, together with Sahid. So they demoed a few other use cases just to show off the possibilities, but I think for production it's mainly the BCH Guru that's using Cash Connect. And the good thing about Cash Connect is for the future, it can recognize templates. So we can have like trusted list of templates. And then, for sure, even if you're interacting with a new interface that's also claiming to do cold-run contracts, then you can know for sure, oh yeah, it's using the same template. My wallet recognizes this template or that template. So then the trust is not anymore that you need to inspect the transaction or trust the website, but it's really with the wallets verifying the template. So of course you could still have untrusted templates, and then the risk is again, there isn't not any extra protection that Cash Connect can add, but at least it allows for recognizing templates, and this is a big step forward in security. If we go to a large scale where people cannot be expected to know every kind of dApp that's out there.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, I guess we'll see in 2 or 3 times that will just be the standard that's integrated into everything, but it's just going to take a little bit of time. Like people are always asking with Selene, like, oh, can we have this? Can we have that? Like everybody wants Cash Fusion, people want Cash tokens, they want shareable link. That in the future they'll be like, where's Cash Connect? It's like there's so many things. I'm glad that we're in this situation where we have so many things that would obviously be amazing includes. We just can only get to them one at a time. But that's much better than having the opposite problem where you don't have enough stuff and you're kind of scratching around like, what do we do next, guys? That means you've got low user demand, but we definitely don't have that problem. So I'm loving it.
Yeah, I agree. We definitely flipped from, I would say, the one side to the other extreme. Whereas maybe 2 years ago, I know some wallets which were kind of looking around, do we need to invent our own new standards to innovate? Well, now there's so much innovation going on that, it's hard to keep up as a wallet dev. So you really need to pick and choose your priorities. And I think this will also come back with the XO wallet. So for them, it will also be a task to really prioritize on which things do we want to innovate and which things do we want to keep the same, or do we want to support later, put it on the backlog, because there's so many features you could add and there's only so much time for development.
But hopefully we can ramp that up. Again, that's why it's so important then that we're attracting and bringing in new developers, because it's a bit of a self-creating problem in that sense, which is the more developers you get in, the faster you can develop and advance things. But then the more they innovate and they add new things, and then it snowballs on itself. But that's how we get a thriving technical ecosystem, which then produces a thriving cryptocurrency overall, right? So speaking of that, let's chat a bit about the chips. Like you said, we talked about it fairly extensively, I'd say, at Bliss. I'm thinking especially on that last panel, we were discussing it, and I think we've done a much better job, even before getting into the technical elements, of the communication aspect. We're front running these upgrades by much longer periods of time, giving everyone a chance to think about it, and that's why there, of course, hasn't been sort of no contention, but there's been very little contention, and there's also been no sort of suggestion that anybody was going to have a split or anything like that. That's going great, but it's the VM limits and the BigInt chip that we've discussed on this show a bunch of times. Like you said, these stakeholder expressions of support have now started. Jason Dreisner put out his mini Satoshi, did Luke Pryor. I saw other people were starting to chime in too. I don't know if you've done one yet. Not that
I've sent my statements of support or approval to Jason. So shortly in the coming days, they should also appear in the stakeholder section.
Okay, all right. So walk me through that. What was your thought process there, and why are you excited about this upgrade?
Yeah, so I've been following the chips for a long time because we discussed them at Bliss. And as a contract developer, I've run into the limits, that the VM limits that the chip aims to solve. So currently there's a 201 opcode limit and a 520 byte limit for smart contracts. So 201 opcodes is very small, and 520 bytes is also very small, but usually you run into the opcode limit first. And what's the worst thing about the current limits is when you do like a malicious contract. So you say, I want to spam the BCH network, let me just try to crash everyone's nodes. Then you can, even with these 201 opcodes, you can do a lot of hashes and cryptography, or just duplicating items and trying to make them as large as possible in memory. So even with 201 opcodes and 520 bytes, you can do some attacks draining CPU cycles from the nodes. And luckily 201 is low enough that it's not too bad, but would it just be naively increased with 5x, then the worst case would get exponentially worse. Because, for example, if you can duplicate and concatenate, so this just means you have an item in memory and you make it twice as large, but you keep doing this, it's exponential. So by a certain point, no node will be able to have enough RAM to keep following this, so many nodes would crash. So we want to, of course, prevent this. And the VM limits can raise this bar of 201 opcodes a lot for normal developers, but do it in a way that this worst case scenario, it gets more secure. So the worst case cannot happen to the same extent as we have on the 201 opcode. So it's a really great chip where it allows more honest use cases of smart contracts, but restricts the malicious attack vectors that we could see on the network.
Yeah, and have you been doing a deep dive into all the testing and different stuff going on around that? How sort of thorough was your due diligence on this over that period of time before you decided to sign it off?
Yeah, so I've carefully gone through the rationale, and over time a lot was added. So I would say now, if you have questions about any of the design decisions, it will really be explained what the logic was and what the data was often that guided these decisions. But for the testing themselves, I know the results because there's actually graphs of the benchmarks, but I have not looked at the actual implementation of all the benchmarks. But I know they did exhaustive testing. So I read to some of the cases they covered, not the code, but just high level, what kind of attacks or spam or what opcodes did they measure and how did they measure it. And it was really thorough testing. I would say that the most thorough research that's ever been done on the Bitcoin VM. So that's not just Bitcoin Cash, but also any of the forks and the code forks and like BTC or even Litecoin, Dogecoin, BSV, whatever. And we have I'm confident you can say that we have now the most thorough testing and insights into the capabilities and limits of the virtual machine. So that's super exciting.
Yeah, damn, this is just another area that the BCH community is just quietly crushing it. All these different edges, are starting to snowball together. It needs a little bit more time, maybe another year or two before the market really kind of wakes up. I mean, obviously, you and I are both in it every single day and making noise about, hey guys, look at what we've got going on here, but the rest of the world just really hasn't realized yet. At what point do you think that's going to start crossing the radar in a big way? Do you have any sense of that?
Yeah, I think it will take applications, right? Because they have a marketing budget for example, if you look at general protocols, they had to invest first a lot in the upgrades that they need for their smart contracts and in infrastructure and whatever. But now that their product is working well, they have many users, they're profitable, now they can do more marketing, do more outreach, focus on user retention. So I think really it's at the top layer, at the application layer, where we will see the most advancement on this front. So once applications become more mature and they have like revenue, and then they can keep on expanding and they have this budget. So this is kind of the way I see it playing out, is that the application layer, once it becomes profitable and they have found their niche, they will do a lot of this hard work for us. But they also have a niche use case, of course. They will just promote mainly their own product, and BCH maybe as a way to get into it, or they will often have to inform users, like they will have to maybe first tell them about smart contracts on BCH or about cash tokens before they can pitch their specific, and maybe about Wallet Connect. So that there will be a lot of general learning that has to take place, even if you just want to use one specific decentralized app, for example.
Yeah, it makes sense. And did you think there was any problem, or did you have any doubts or anything about this whole big Ints? We've been discussing that on the show. Various people was it coming in too late? Was there enough work done on it? Is this kind of throwing the chip process a bit out the window or anything like that? What was your take on that? I mean, I guess you've endorsed them both now, right? So you're just let's go.
So I definitely want the chip to be activated, but I think it's really good that Jason was upfront about like that he didn't exactly follow the process. And also some of the technicalities, that because there were two chips, but on a technical level, they're highly related. So the VM limits re-engineering is really what allows for these begins. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible. So they had to, as was discussed on that episode, they had to be tested together as if we would get big integers anyway. And because it's not, if you make assumption about the limits, it's they need to stay the same in the future, or you don't want to invalidate kind of contracts or application development that has been taking place. So I think it was really good that it was upfront communicated that there is some technicality about the process, but I think overall it's definitely worth it to go for it. It's well tested. Like everyone I've seen has been enthusiastic about it. Developers, application developers, contract developers. So I think the process is there to yield a good result. But if a small change to the process, or like a small making a bit of a dent to the process, an exception, exactly. Making an exception can yield a great result 12 months earlier, then it doesn't make sense to delay it or cause a big fuss about it, I think.
Yeah, I got to say, I mean, we've been very expansive about that on this show, talking about it on nearly every episode with a variety of different people, because I think it is really important. And that's obviously we end up in a disaster if it turns into a split, or people are caught off guard, or they're complaining or whatever. But I think, we're looking pretty good for it, in the sense that my own observation of like you said, people in the scene, even the community forums when we did the listener survey, is that people are pretty enthusiastic about it. I don't get any sense that there's a segment of the community that is like sort of worried about this or doesn't want it to happen or doesn't think it would be a good idea. Like, you got to dot the I's and cross the T's. I think there's a little bit of caution in that sense, but I don't think it just seems like everybody agrees. I guess that's the whole point of having this process, right? It's been well communicated.
People can all send in their statements. So both, of course, like approvals, but also people who want to reject it or abstain. Whatever, like all statements are welcomed and encouraged. So please, if you have taken a look at this chip and reviewed it to some extent, send your statement to Jason on either X or Telegram or the research forum, and then he can include it into the stakeholders list. Because indeed, the goal is to have as wide a coverage as we can about the stakeholders, and then even if we know that there is some contention or some segment of people that do not want it, then it's better for everyone to be informed about this problem or contention than that we do not know about it, right? So this is what the stakeholders is for, that everyone is kind of included and listened to. So if you have still any critiques after reviewing and reading the discussion, then you can still add those critiques in your statement. So yeah, we'll keep an eye out for that, I guess, for the first possible abstains or negative reactions, but then also for all the positive approvals coming in over the coming month, I think.
Yeah, and then you said obviously you're super excited and you want to get this locked in and ready to go. Is there anything specific that you are excited about having or unlocking either in your projects or anyone else's, or is it more just like we don't want to delay? Delay is super expensive and the opportunity cost is huge.
Yeah, so for DEXs, so this is the Calderon DEX, also CashScript and JetX, they all ran into this issue that's solved by BigInt, where you now have overflows in your numbers. So we have 64-bit ints, but if you multiply a token amount, this can be up to 64 ints. So they could already go to the maximum. And for an AMM DEX, you usually do X times Y equals some constant. So then this can overflow for tokens with a big circulating supply or a big total supply. And this was an issue that all three had, and now it will just be solved without them having to do anything. So no need for contract upgrades. It will just be the VM that says, okay, I no longer overflow once math gets large. I will just be able to do it because we will have good limits that make sure that it's still not an attack or a spam denial of service or anything like that. It will just be honest use cases. And so that's mainly what I'm excited about. The DEXs will be much simpler and we will be able to do more without any extra work. But then additionally, also that you will be able to do like cryptography on the stack. So if you want to experiment with zero knowledge proofs, then these use a large number math, and then you will just be able to do it and start development without asking anyone for permission. So it will unlock a big range of new projects.
Yeah, this is something I want to highlight for people, and I am definitely not the right person to speak to this in any great detail, but I have heard a little bit about this, that I think maybe people are undervaluing this BigInt stuff in terms of, like you said, the cryptography, which is in the whole of crypto outside of BCH. There's a lot of research going on in all these zero knowledge proofs, and the explosion of crypto has driven a huge amount of interest and therefore innovation and also funding to cryptography, which then allows you to improve your technology. That's why it's a cryptocurrency. You get better cryptography, you get a better currency, right? And so that's all going on, but BCH has been mostly sort of isolated from that. But if we then get access to all of that, suddenly it makes us attractive for people in those specialties to come into the scene, or for any people who are already in the scene to develop something that might be innovative across the whole of cryptocurrency. And then suddenly that would get attention and people would be like, wow, these guys are really cutting edge. That would be a huge credibility leap forward that we could have if something like that came about from this, right?
Yeah, so So the main application I see that a lot of people want to use zero knowledge for is these zero knowledge rollups. They have been spearheaded by Ethereum, but now also on BTC with BitVM and some of these other IDs. We see this ID to offload execution to a second layer, a sidechain or whatever, and then have like proofs through cryptography, which I just verified on the main chain. And this way you can have very large computation on the sidechain happening, like transfers or DeFi or whatever, and a very low footprint on the layer one. But this is for now just not a use case that is really that people in BCH have a high need for, right? Because usually these layer twos only become needed when fees rise and it gets congested. So that's totally not problems we have. So I'm looking forward to seeing what other use cases, like what will people in BCH use these cryptography for. And we have already seen one person, BitcoinCash artist, he's a developer with that nickname, and he has been implementing assert, so the block header difficulty adjustment in script. So as a smart contract, he wants to do header verification. And this can be used for various things, but it remains to be seen like what specific applications will leverage this, because for now it's mainly a proof of concept, I would say.
Yeah, one other area is, we probably don't need it as much for the roll-ups and the scalability stuff. I've been a bit critical of other coins for going in that direction on this show. So I just want to be clear. We're not suddenly like, oh, now we can do it too, so it's great. Like in the past we couldn't do it, so it was bad, and now we can do it, it's good. No, that's not the case at all. I don't think the BCH community will be particularly excited about it, but the reverse might be true. The fact that BCH can do that might mean that people who are interested in those things in other coins then have a reason to look into BCH, and maybe they try porting their projects across, or they get involved, and then maybe then their mindset changes and they think, okay, we didn't need as many layer twos to begin with.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just saying
it's a possibility, right?
Yeah, and it's a use case that we see today. So how it will play out on BCH, of course, is different. But this is something that zero knowledge is already like widely used for. And another thing is like Tornado Cash privacy.
Yes.
So we could have a privacy sidechain for BCH. Like I don't inherently see a problem with that. And then it might make sense to also use some cryptography in the contract, but everything depends on specifics. So it's of course difficult to predict what people will be interested in building. But many options are now, like many doors are opened.
Yeah, the privacy stuff could be also quite big, because I've been seeing as BCH has been rising in the narrative, and as BTC has increasingly lost traction, and ETH also has kind of stalled out a little bit. Their community's not sure what they're doing. They still have high fees. Their network effect is not growing as fast as it used to. People have been looking more seriously at, specifically Monero seems to have been doing quite well, because everybody can go, oh, it's still P2P cash, and they can talk about how great the privacy is and everything. And they also don't need to necessarily directly confront, oh, I was on the wrong side of the block size war or whatever, right? So they can get away without that cognitive dissonance. So if BCH could also slide in there with some better privacy and so forth, then that could just be, I mean, it's stupid, but it could be effective, that people could psychologically then think, oh, I'm interested in BCH, for the privacy. It's like for the tech, rather than, oh, I was wrong about this the whole time. Then they would have an excuse to be like, oh, wait, it's actually kicking off here, and with what I'm interested in, right? So I'm actually excited about that. Privacy is it's not our weakest point, but it's also not our strongest point either, right? So that would be a huge upgrade if we could get more in the conversation there too, I think. Obviously you're trying to balance how many different things. We only have so many resources, but that would be somewhere I think we could make a big impact in improving.
Yeah, one thing I want to mention, so for the BigInt specifically, I thought DEXs was the main use case, and specifically JEDEX, so it was a proof of concept that worked kind of in a test environment, and the main thing that was still needed, as Jason said, so there were a few items that it could be extended with, but the main thing is it wouldn't work for tokens with a large circulating supply because of this math issue that you can have overflows. So now it will just work out of the box. So in theory, Jason could just work on the application layer once BigInts are deployed and get JEDEX like a consumer ready, like a ready for actual usage. So that is super exciting also. That is something that was like a proof of concept becomes unblocked by the BigInts. So I would say both chips intend to unblock projects. Both the 201 limit was just a block for a project which did advanced contracts and ran into that. And the BigInts the same. It was very hard to work around with maths around this 64-bit integer limit, especially when you also had the opcode limit. And now it will just be unblocked. So it is like limits people had to worry about that are now just gone essentially.
Yeah, if the world is not ready, I don't think, for Jason Dreisner to be building at the app layer. You know, he spent so many years perfecting the stack at the lower levels. Once he puts his incredible energy into some app layer stuff, oof, that's going to be good. So yeah, probably worth it just for that. We'll see. All right. So speaking of the ongoing development, we had a really exciting announcement this week from the General Protocols team, who announced their new project XO.cash. They've got a video explaining exactly kind of what it is that we're just going to play here and then talk through it a little bit.
Introducing the XO system, a new era in decentralized finance, built on the bitcoincash UTXO blockchain. Traditionally, building decentralized applications on UTXO blockchains has been complex, with higher barriers to entry compared to Ethereum's EVM model. XO changes that by offering an open-source stack and wallet, making UTXO-based app development as accessible as building on Ethereum, but with the added benefits of Bitcoin Cash's scalability and low fees. The stack will also come with the XO wallet, the first smart wallet built on XO, allowing seamless integration with the new generation of XO apps that will undoubtedly be built on XO. This wallet empowers users to interact directly with decentralized financial services while keeping full control of their assets. No intermediaries required. With its permissionless access, XO eliminates technical and social barriers, enabling developers to create powerful, secure, and robust financial apps more easily than ever before. So whether you're a developer or a user, XO opens up a world of possibilities for you, leading the future of decentralized finance.
All right, so there we have it. And as of today, there's been no code or nothing like that. It's just this video. And then there's also a pretty slick website that you can have a look at XO.cash. And the GP guys did tell me like that they've prepared this marketing because they want to get this kind of branding and get people thinking about it. But it will obviously turn into a real product in the maybe the not too distant long term, but it's not going to be like dropping tomorrow or anything. You know, there was no dates announced or anything like that, but they have been talking about the whole idea of the native wallet stack and stuff like that for quite a while. And this now marks that they're serious, like they're committing to it, because they're now putting their public image on the line in announcing this project. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, like we were talking before about, okay, you have the full nodes, the indexes, libauth, CashScript, and then the wallets, and then the apps on top of that. Sort of seems to me like maybe this might be kind of the layer in between CashScript and the wallets, and just sort of similar to where Cash Connect is now, but maybe supercharged, or maybe extending Cash Connect or something like that. And then they're going to build the pieces so that anybody can come in from any of these other ecosystems and just make apps really easily that will just instantly work with all the BCH wallets once they're on this kind of tech, right? That's kind of the sense I'm getting from it. What did you make of this?
Yeah, so indeed, first, relevant to emphasize that indeed they're splitting out the XO stack, like the XO tooling, the library, I assume, from the XO wallet. So this also means that in the future, if this takes off and people find it interesting, or they want to play around with part of this wallet, they can easily use the library. Or the library would presumably also be used by application developers maybe. And I know one person on the team is Jim, and Jim is the developer behind Cash Connect. So definitely they have all the knowledge and know-how about Cash Connect. So probably they will be extending it somehow or integrating it to some extent. So this is not announced, but this is speculation because he's part of the team. So it seems reasonable. And as you said, the website is super slick. So take a look with nice colors, and they did a very nice job on the announcing it. But for more details, we'll have to stay tuned and keep a listen on what is cooking over there. Maybe on the research forum, or I assume they will have to make some decisions or design decisions that they will communicate openly about, or maybe standards that they want to push. Like we said with the URLs, the claimable URLs. Maybe these are standards that are more than wider than one wallet. So maybe XO might want to push wider standards, or they could launch, but then there might be XO specific standards, right? That there is specific features that are not available in any wallets besides XO. And this of course means once the wallet takes off and it has some users, then other wallets and users will also ask for these features, and then we have even more new innovation going on the wallet layer and even more things to implement. So that kind of remains to be seen what features they pick to innovate on. So presumably that will be everything related to dApps and smart contracts. But I know, for example, Jason Dreisner has also done research on how to improve seed phrases. So this is really how to do backups. And I know Jonathan, another team member from General Protocols, he is big on the NFC cards, like we had at Bliss from General Protocol. So you might be able to do backups with NFC and things like that. So it's not only the Wallet Connect or the DeFi things that might need innovation. Maybe we could also rethink backups or shareable links. So there's so many places where you could innovate that it's we also need to look out, or the team from General Protocols, that it doesn't become overwhelming everything at once, because making the perfect wallet with all features everyone wants, it's a project that will never get released. So I do think, just like for Cashonize, my big trade-off was it does have cash tokens as a brand new wallet, but it was a single address based wallet, and it didn't have any of these other features. It was kind of single focused. So that will definitely be also where they have to make trade-offs, because you cannot implement everything day one, of course.
Yeah, well, that's right. And I'm so excited about this, because the General Protocols guys, they never promise anything that they're not going to deliver. They're never making big. This is the kind of video that you would see and think, okay, all right, we're gonna unlock a whole new generation of apps. And so if it was somebody coming in just making these kind of claims, you would be skeptical. But because it's those guys, and I know that they're serious and they're gonna deliver on it, and they have all the right people and all the in-depth knowledge to get it done, and their track record is so good. Obviously they sponsor this show as well, so just before anyway, Jeremy, conflict of interest. But I'm genuinely so excited about this, because I feel like this might just be the last sort of step in that whole tooling stack. I'm not saying, okay, this will get released and then nobody will ever work on tooling ever again, but I'm saying the BCH community has been working pretty hard the last 2 years, especially, to really do a pivot to a more of a DeFi oriented chain and an app-based chain, and then catch up to Ethereum and the rest. And we can see some of that in the fact that now we have Wallet Connect, which is similar to what a lot of the ETH ecosystems have. And then we have Cash Connect. So we've done one better already. But then if you could do just one better than that, now you are really just blowing away the rest of the industry. And if we can get that, then I think basically the infrastructure will all be there. Another indication is talking about Jason Dreisner. If he is more excited to stop working on some of the protocol stuff and start building apps, that shows that things have got to a point of maturity that we don't need to be fiddling around too much in those lower layers, and things can start shipping real products to consumers. And I think once that really gets going, obviously we already have some, but once the that really gets going, once the mind share moves onto that, it will happen like very, very quickly. Like over the span of a year or two, suddenly it'll be like new app, new app, new app, new exciting project. And like you said, also that brings with it the marketing of people then explaining, here's all the tooling that we use to make this thing that nobody else could make. And it's all really slick. Come and try it out, right? So I can just see that this whole, and that's what the website says, a new era in UTXO blockchain finance. I don't think they're overhyping that. I really don't.
Yeah, so as you said, the GP guys have a great track record, have put out some incredible innovation already, so super promising. Yeah, the only thing I would say is, because we're both wallet developers, we know how hard it is and how so quickly you can have a backlog, and scope creep is a real thing, of course, where you aim too broadly, and it's ever increasing. So that's one thing where a timeline might seem like reasonable for 6 months, but software development is notorious for delays. So, but I'm also super excited, like a new era in UTXO, let's bring it.
Yeah, and it's really this kind of bizarre feature of cryptocurrency history that the Bitcoin Cash community is essentially going to be the ones who has to recreate the excitement about UTXO, right? That got completely lost in the stalling of BTC and the block size war and everything, was that everybody got onto Ethereum, and before you know it, everyone was excited about EVM, and everything's EVM compatible, and everyone's trying to make EVM related stuff. And BCH is just going to have to right the ship basically solo as well, too. It's like we're not getting any help. Not like the BTC guys, they're still in their quagmire all the time. But it's not even just them. Like Dogecoin, Litecoin, Dash, all these other UTXO chains, where are they at releasing, CashScript or XO.cash like type equivalents? Nowhere. They're not that they're cash tokens. Like they don't have all this stuff that we have. It's basically just up to BCH to carry the flag for the whole the whole concept, right? Which is why, as if it isn't hard enough for us to explain the branding and the history, we also have to explain the technology. But of course, the upside is that if you are that market leader who is doing all that stuff, then once you have that lead, everybody starts copying you, and then the mind share flows towards you, and people want to be involved in what's cutting edge. They don't want to be involved in the crappy competitor that's just like trailing along a few steps behind, right? So I don't know, just tell me about this. What do you think of it? Do you get that same sense that I do, that the whole cryptocurrency got completely diverted onto EVM, and now BCH is just like charging out the front with a flag for UTXO to try and get its attention back, right?
Yeah, that's also how I see it, and that's also why it's great branding. So UTXO deserves to be more in the spotlight as a term and something that's a real positive benefit. So XO taking part of the UTXO is really clever. And also now you see people talk about like parallelizable EVM, so that has become kind of like a buzzword for alternative chains to Ethereum who also want to do EVM. But yeah, UTXO is hugely parallelizable. Like they call it embarrassingly parallel in computer science. So it's just trivial to solve this problem. Like it's not even a problem in UTXO. So if this is the core issue that Ethereum has gotten itself into, that it cannot scale because it cannot do parallelism, and it needs to offload execution to all these side chains and layer 2s. Well, we don't have a problem with execution because of this parallelism, and it's just a solved problem for UTXO.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable how far the narrative got shifted and diverted to bring it back. It's like, yeah, the solution was already there on day one, and just because of all the propaganda and stuff, everybody overlooked it. But I think in history, when in hindsight, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, people will be like, oh yeah, Satoshi had it right all along, UTXO model, da-da-da. But you'd need quite a lot more time and infrastructure around that to make it more approachable to those end developers. And that's the state, like with CashScript and XO that we've been talking about. That's the kind of stuff once you get over that bar, you only need to get over it once. You know, you only need to build up all that infrastructure and so forth once. And obviously, you need to maintain it and so forth, but once it's rolling, it's rolling. So I'm stoked. I'm really looking forward to this.
I think that
yeah.
The video also did it justice, right? So it talked about how EVM took off earlier or has been taking off because it's easier for application developers to get started with. And that's true because you have this global state, you just have a database essentially. It's really easy to get started with. And then you have Solidity, which made it easy for smart contracts to be developed and became kind of an industry standard and is well known even outside the space, like Solidity development in the wider programming world is like just known. And this is why CashScript in my mind is so important, because we will need an equivalent. We will need something that makes it easy to write smart contracts, but this is just one layer for the compiler. You don't only need the smart contract language, you need a way to have templates and have that's what cash connectors, and you need a way for the dApp to interface with the wallet. So there's a whole range of problems to be solved. And I think, if the XO wallet can take on some of these and provide a good solution, and an innovative way of looking at things, that will be like greatly important.
Yeah, real breakthrough. Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on that, and hopefully, like I said, I think that's now starting to cook over there, but they'll need some time, and maybe in a few months on the show we'll have some more updates. But exciting things in the future. Got a couple other bits of news that happened this last week. BCH Bull hit 500,000 BCH cumulative volume. So that's over 175 million USD has been through BCH Bull over the last 2 years. Time flies. I almost can't believe that BCH Bull has been in prod for 2 years already, but they're just churning through the stats there, and that's just absolutely incredible. You had the Moria Money, the stable coin that the Shadow Wizards Cauldron guys have been talking about, I guess, was being hinted at again. So maybe they're getting closer to release a little bit. And also on the BTC community, we've had some stuff with these CAT 20 tokens on Fractal Bitcoin that we talked about recently. I hadn't even looked into this at all, but you maybe told me you had some thoughts on some of this. From these other bits of tech news, what do you see happening here?
Yeah, so the first topic, BCH Bull with 500,000 BCH cumulative, it's indeed crazy how far they have come. I remember, I think both of us did the alpha testing, when the platform was much more clunky and they were still figuring out the best flow and stuff. So it has come an incredibly long way, and time flies. And they really set the stage for other companies, but also other developers of how you can launch a successful app on BCH. You just have to find your niche, keep at it, grow a team, and it will not happen in 1 year. And they even had setbacks, right, with the D token, which is now ancient news because they are so successful by now. But just if you keep at it, it's a kind of an inspiring story. They even upgraded whole BCH for their contracts, like the 64 int or the native introspection. Some of their team were the main drivers behind those upgrades. So an incredible shout out to the General Protocols team, and congrats on the accomplishments. And then Moria Money from the Cauldron team. So I see this as kind of an upcoming new team of more new savvy developers, and they seem to be mainly building in the open, which has pros and cons. So the cool thing is that we can see a lot of teasers, but on the other side, I think it might be that if you reveal something, that it will still have to go through this whole process, right? That it will still take months to work this flow out, or that the UI is like a design mockup, but it's not finalized, or things like that. But it's really cool to see them being talked about, and many people in BCH also are excited about using like over collateralized stable coins or loans. So these are just topics that are, I think 2 years ago, they were just not being discussed like loans on a UTXO blockchain. But now there's like a common thing people think about, and they ask, when will this be released? Like how soon? And they didn't give any announcement, so it also might still be a way out. But yeah, just super exciting that this is being talked about, loans on UTXO over collateralized stablecoins. And we can see this also in other communities. So I think this is what the fractal thing touches upon. So this is a new fork of Bitcoin started by mainly Ordinals people. So officially it's by the Ordinals wallet, I think, or the marketplace. And
Unisat, yeah.
Yeah, Unisat. And so the chain is not really important in my mind, but they activated CAT as a demonstration of what this new OpCat could be able to do on BTC. And they are now like inventing script verified tokens. So that's something interesting you can do with smart contracts, and which we don't need to do luckily on BCH because we have native tokens, cash tokens. But with script, if you have Segwit, you can do script verified tokens, which means that the script itself verifies every transfer. So this would be a lot better than just having ordinals, because ordinals are with an off-chain indexer like SLP. So this is probably innovation we would have seen if we didn't have cash tokens. So this is, to me, the CAT20 standard is more like maybe similar to the PMV3 discussions of years back. Which is interesting, but also the transaction sizes, because it has to do the whole validation in the transaction itself. I think they can only do like 500 transactions in a block. So the transactions are huge in size. And on BTC, this would mean if a CAT was ever activated and you wanted to use like a CAT20 token, there would be like huge transaction costs. So I just thought this was like interesting innovation. You can also see like a bit contrast what the people on BTC are thinking about. Like they want to do tokens. That's also where money is, of course, like with the ordinals and with NFTs. And they want to do tokens in a better script validated way. So they're starting to think along the same lines as we did maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So funny parallels going on there.
Yeah, well, they're just behind the ball and all that. And I just think, yeah, it's really interesting how ideas flow between communities, right? And the BCH community, for the most part, as far as I've seen, has basically stopped talking to the BTC guys. Like, I mean, I still poke them very occasionally on Twitter, but I don't even really bother to listen to any of their podcasts or anything like that anymore. One, I'm too busy with there's enough going on in BCH, and two, there's no point. We've been there, we've told them, guys, this is the answer, here's the future, yada yada. For the most part, they didn't listen, and they're just stumbling along at like snail's pace, you know. But of course, they're just reinventing the wheel within the limits that they have constrained on themselves, right? That's it's like, if you engineers are smart, they're creative in the sense that if you give them limits, they will figure out creative ways within those limits. But that's the whole point of VM limits, right? It's like, yeah, but then if you just increase the box, suddenly you're not trying to spending your brain power on the cleverest way to do something simple. Instead, simple things are just simple, and you can spend your brain power on making something good, right?
Yeah, that's perfectly put.
Well, anyway, we'll see. They can maybe get there when they get there. So we've got a community comment of the week in this same vein. It's a two-parter I saw because you retweeted this, so I thought it was pretty good. So the first part comes from Luke Pryor, who is a good community contributor and friend of the show, and hopefully we'll be getting him back soon for the meme competition. But he said, I'm excited for the growth of our DeFi ecosystem. It's still early, but the signs are there, so it's starting to cook. And then the second part is from Alex Hormozy, who I've mentioned on the show very briefly before. He's a business kind of YouTuber, big investor type of guy, and he's also one of those people where his Twitter feed is not what's going on in his life or commenting on topical affairs or something. It's all these sort of pithy quotes and wisdom one-liner type of thing. And he had this one this week that was really popular. Quote, school rewards you for what you can remember, the market rewards you for what you can predict, the second pays better, end quote. So kind of just making the point that, okay, there's academia and then there's the real world. And the market doesn't, like, academic credentials can matter to some extent, but in reality, what matters is getting it right. And that's predicting the future and then being there ahead of time, which just ties into what we were saying, right? And I saw you also retweeted this. So is this the direction? This is the whole Bitcoin Cash community, right? We're predicting that in the future, people are going to want the UTXO model, they're going to want cheap fees, and they're going to just all flood in, and we're going to be here, right?
Yeah, so this resonates with me because with technology, you're always kind of making a bet about the future, right? So whether it's in AI or in cryptocurrency or in VR, as long as you're tightly involved or investing or have something at stake, you're kind of predicting where the future of that technology will go. And in cryptocurrency, even more so because it's directly tied to your money that you hold in this asset, or maybe even your income if you are as closely in this as we are. So yeah, indeed, if Bitcoin Cash takes off, definitely this has big financial consequences for everyone involved. And it is difficult to know the future. So this is kind of the thing with being an entrepreneur. So for example, if you are looking to start developing a dApp on BCH, you're looking at how many users are there, which proven products are there, like what are my chances. But you also you need to predict things about the future, like how do I expect this to grow? How difficult do I expect this to be? Long run, how do I expect this to grow? All these things that you need to estimate or predict, because there is no good data for the future, of course. So and it pays better than just memorizing stuff. I think that's true also.
Well, just on this topic, I have a little personal note that I want to throw in, which is that I've moved up to rank number 2 on BCH Guru. I'm now number 2 on the leaderboard. I said a couple of weeks ago that I think I was rank 5, and I was like, I'm going to rank up. Here we are. I'm rank 2. Rank 1 is Abla-4, number 4-life. So shout out to Abla for life, who is currently at overall position 0.1504, and I'm at 0.07784. I got 5 games completed, 4 wins, 80% win rate. So I'm coming there. This is this Alex Hormozy right here in practice on chain. So I'm gunning for number 1, and shout out to BCH Guru and anybody else who I recommend in the community. Jump on there, give it a go, lose some money, and or try and beat me up there to number 1, because I'm having so much fun with this. It's amazing. Have you used BCH Guru? Have you made some bets in there?
I have. I needed it also for testing, of course, to make sure Cash Connect is working in Cashonize. So I have placed a few bets, but I haven't been keeping close eyes on this tab. Like, I think I'm probably doing pretty badly, just because I was always doing testing for other stuff. I was never ranking.
Excuses. I use the excuses. Okay, all right. Well, let's see. Get your game face on then, and we'll mix it up. We'll mix it up there. Okay, we got one other thing that just came up this week, which I thought was really, really interesting. Cheap Lightning was posting in the Telegram group about these stats of dormant coins. So you can look on the blockchain and do blockchain analytics, how many transactions, et cetera, but there's these stats where you can look at how many coins have not been spent over what period of time. So you can basically see as the supply either gets lost, burned, locked in a DeFi contract, or put into cold storage, versus if it's being circulated in the economy, people are spending it to each other, or they're moving it around between their wallets, right? So at the moment, there is 19.77 million BCH and a slightly less BTC coins circulating. But from this graph, there's 12.05 million BCH coins have been dormant for over 1 year. So that means in the last year, there's been a little more than, what's this, 7 million coins have been transacting over the last year, and the this is like quite mind bending to think about. So I'm maybe not doing the best job of explaining this. But so there's 19 million total coins in the last 1 month. 17.35 million of them have been dormant on BTC. So probably about 1.6 coins on BCH. 1.6 million coins are moving in the last month. And then if you take that back 1 year, it drops to 12.5 million. So there's been about 7 million coins moving in the last 12 months. I think that's right. And what you can do is we can see over time, obviously there's new BCH also being issued at the same time, but you can see if more of the community are starting to hodl their coins because they put them in cold storage, and then 1 year later, those coins pop up on this dormant line, which ticks up higher and higher. And right now it's rising quite substantially. So I found this super interesting. If you compare to BTC, so we've got 12.05 million BCH coins dormant in the last for over 1 year. And for BTC, it's 12.74 million. So it's higher, but it's close. Whereas in the last 1 month, BCH has 17.35 million have been dormant since September 1st, where on BTC it's 18.57 million. So that's essentially the difference between the BCH and BTC price. Like they're at whatever 60,000 and we're at 300, and the difference is that there's 1.2 million coins roughly that are moving on BCH per month that are not moving on BTC, that people have already just hodled them basically. So I just think that's sort of like fascinating stats to get an insight into, right? That we can see this money happening in real time. And if anybody wants, like that, we can see that's the numbers. There needs to be 1.2 million BCH that the BCH community goes out and buys and puts in cold storage. Probably essentially would get us to the BTC price. Isn't that quite an interesting idea?
Yeah, these long-term dormant coins is to me quite crazy, because even if you still have cold storage or a hardware wallet or some physical other location, then not checking up on them or not moving them from your address even to another address, or combining them, like consolidating, or for years, this I always hope these people have very good security practices that they can access those coins, and of course some of the old coins are also lost, but the 1 year dormant metric is really interesting metric, for especially I think for investors, but also to keep up on tabs. I would assume that if there's high volatility, maybe more coins will start to move because some people will sell, some will buy, and they might want to do this with big amounts. So for example, if there's a huge price increase, some of this cold storage might become circulating again, and the reverse also. If there's a big price drop, maybe some people will lose confidence and move out those cold storage paper hands, the BCH bags.
One other thing that I looked at, again, this when you're thinking about these dormant coins, over different time periods, it is a bit mind-bending. So I do recommend everybody to open up these charts. We've got links on the slide, bitcoincash.com, and you can look at the graphs and adjust them and think about it yourself. But one other thing is that, so 4 years ago, BCH had 7.32 million coins dormant, and then we've said up until 1 year ago we had 12.05 million BCH coins dormant. So excluding the coins that are actively circulating on BCH, that means since the XCC split, so that means you can't be taking into account of coins have been lost or burned or people forgot to split them or whatever. That means over that period from 2021 to 2023, that 3 years, roughly 5 million or a bit less, 4.7 something million BCH have gone dormant in that window. Like that's the stacking that the BCH community have been doing. Now that's obviously not unique to us. There's a similar effect is happening on BTC, but that's really quite something when you think about it, right? 4 million BCH into cold storage.
Yeah, and it's also
3 windows.
That shows it's not all speculators and day traders. Like people at least have a longer term horizon, like years, like 5-year, 10-year plan. Yeah, so as you said, a lot are in 4-year already in cold storage, but I think this 5-year mark, 10-year mark, some of these coins will definitely be in cold storage for that long. So yeah, pretty wild.
Anyway, just another reminder to everyone: maybe check up on your cold storage stack. Don't move them necessarily. Keep them nice and dormant, but make sure you've still got the keys and just put some of them in.
And proper backups.
That's right. Do your backups and withdraw from the exchanges. Right. Take them out of the exchange, put them in your own cold storage, and that's how we get to a $60,000 price. We only need. Only just 1.2 million BCH. So if everyone can just chip in 1 or 2 here or there, boom, we'll get there. Okay, meme of the week. This one, it's a classic internet type of meme. Somebody has edited together. Joe Fintech, shout out on the Telegram group, posted this one. It's the 2 tweets. The top tweet is the personality girl, who said, "What do men actually want?" Just a classic internet type of format, men and women always being like, what does the other one want? And there's always something about like sex in there, basically. And then the meme is that somebody's put in the reply, Becca Winkert, although this looks edited in, I doubt this is what she said, but it's edited to say, quote, "Decentralized, censorship-resistant money which can't be debased by the government," end quote. So I think that's true of the men that listen to this show.
Yeah, sounds like to me.
Men in general, I don't know if they really did want this, wouldn't crypto already be more popular than it is? It's already quite popular. Wouldn't it be more popular?
Yeah, half of the people are men. So if those would all be using peer-to-peer electronic cash, I think a lot of our problems would be solved by now.
Yeah, exactly. I thought this was funny because it's the perfect duality of like, this is a serious answer of the BCH community. Yes, that's true. Like and most of the show, the listeners are men, like we saw on the listener survey, right? That's true, but it's not true at all remotely in the broad sense of what do all men want. A lot of them do not give a single shit about any of this, or they're just speculating on other chains, or they don't even get cryptocurrency at all. So I don't know. Just psychology. We'll see. Maybe there'll be a future meme of the week. What do women actually want? And it's like, I don't know, a boyfriend who has decentralized money or something. I don't know. Not my place to be analyzing female psychology.
With very large Bitcoin bags, probably.
A lot of dormant Bitcoin, that might be the answer. Okay, message to the community. You know the drill. What does the BCH community need to hear?
All right, so I would focus this on the smart contracts. So everyone who's been sitting on the sidelines and saying, oh, maybe I will look into this CashScript thing sometime. Well, we overhauled the whole documentation. So give the getting started a read. You will see that you actually can get started. You need a few prerequisites, but you can easily Google how to install those. And then once you have set up the prerequisites, you can get on with getting started. But even before that, you have now the playground, the online kind of IDE developer environment, where we put a lot of time in to get it set up on Mocknet. So this means you can test in a virtual environment with fake UTXO, so you don't even need a testnet wallet and go to a faucet to get testnet coins. You can just go to the playground, start writing your CashScript contract, test it with fake funds, fake UTXOs, create money out of thin air, essentially in this test environment. And then, continue with the getting started. Give us feedback on what we can improve. So yeah, I would encourage everyone, now that we see that this DeFi is becoming bigger and bigger, it's really taking off on BCH. Take a look, and maybe you can be the creator of these dApps that we talk about next time.
Yeah, amazing. That's it. DeFi on BCH. And when everyone realizes that's what's going on, we're going to start seeing a huge flood of new people into the scene, because that's not what anybody expects, that BCH is just suddenly the leading DeFi chain, but we're well on the way. So,
Oh yeah, one more thing about that. One more thing about that is we did actually a Twitter space with some BTC developers quite recently, and it was fun to realize like they were impressed with our progress. Like they have all this mind share and money and so some very bright people, of course, in the large BTC community, but they were impressed with what we were doing in BCH, this small minority that they try to ignore most of the time. But then when it comes to technical development, they need to admit, well, yeah, you guys have been doing some great work. Oh, we want to copy this, or we need to take a look at that. So yeah, that was really funny to me.
Yeah, well, it's great. I mean, that's the thing. Just reality just overpowers the propaganda, right? Eventually, we just get so far ahead, and we're just going to keep increasing that lead, right? Until it just becomes undeniable and undebatable, which it already has. That's the thing. The acknowledgement is starting to flow, but as that gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger, there'll be a tipping point at which they just start converting. It's going to be that simple. Like we're already enough that they're like interested, but not enough that it's hit the tipping point of, okay, fuck these guys. Like I need to be on the winning team. But as that gap keeps growing, it's just gonna be inevitable. So looking forward to that, and can't wait for some of those guys to come join us. We're here anytime. It's open to you. Nothing's stopping you but yourself.
Yeah, if you're listening in, we're happy to connect and talk technicals. Jump into the BCH channel on Telegram or whatever, or the research forum. Yeah, dip your toes in, and I think you will find a welcoming and positive community.
Absolutely. The past is the past. All right. So we're going to give a shout out to our FundMe contributors. So we did finish our campaign. I put in the last 5.5 BCH, which I felt was fair because we had 4.5 BCH budgeted for Argentina, but we're not going to Argentina anymore. So I've canceled out that part of our deliverables, and thank you to everybody who did chip in. Like I said, we had 35 contributors, I believe, including me, so 34 other contributors, which is amazing, and really speaks to the passion that people have for the show, and also to the new Cash Connect, Wallet Connect stuff with FundMe. So thanks to Sayoshi Nakamario for moving the tech forward in that way. It's been amazing. Our contributors, Majamalu, Marcelo, 2024.bcharg.com, BCH Argentina coming up. I'm really keen for that, so look out for more there, everyone. Molecular, Erdogan Talk, Economics Writer, BCH Autist, LFG, Cash Stamps, biggest soundboard for BCH we have. Keep up the great job, guys. Peter Wooler, I think the goal should be and can realistically be everyone simultaneously having on-chain funds. Milton Friedman, Emergent Reasons, Stay Grounded, Stay Awesome, P2P, Electronic Cash for the World. Yeah, Beer. Try to get Vlad Kosti on one of these next episodes. Would be a great discussion as he's opening up. Big V in the Bitcoin Cash Tokyo gang, Bitcoin Cash Tokyo weekly meetup session community, http://bitcoincash.tokyo, and Bitcoin Jason. You are, I am, we are all Satoshi. Let's do our part. He was in the chat before as well. Hello, Jason. Hope you're doing well there in the land down under. And of course, thank you also to our donators, our patrons, Ricky and HP, and our sponsors, General Protocols. Check out bchbull.com, start guide, FAQ, and links are at bitcoincashpodcast.com. Listen to episode 85 and try Celine Model at celine.cash. We've got a huge shill section going these days. I don't know, like it's all important. How do we? Yeah. I'm glad we've got so much stuff going on to connect people with.
Yeah. And generally, shout out to everyone who is supporting these open source initiatives like the podcast, like the different flip starters and FundMe's, because there is a lot of grassroots stuff going on, but also open source software development, so things with no clear economic or revenue model or business model. So there is a need for people to get involved, and thank you everyone who has used Flipstart or has taken a look at FundMe and has helped this whole ecosystem.
Yeah, Bitcoin Jason says, I'm doing good. Very glad to hear that, mate. And Fanta says, Celine is my go-to wallet for donating BCH to YouTubers. Yeah, excellent. Really glad to hear that too. So cool to just be able to connect with everyone via the podcast as we're rolling out more stuff in the BCH community. Amazing. Okay, so any final shout outs, Matthew? Besides, you've got the Flipstarter at flipstarter.cashscript.org, and anything else you need people to go check out?
Not really. So if you're interested in some of the projects I'm doing, take a look at my GitHub. So there's a list of all the tools. So mainly if you're a developer or want to, for example, do an airdrop or something, like you take a look there and you will find the scripts and the programs and the websites. And yeah, let's get in contact. So feel free to reach out. The developer community in BCH is very welcoming and shares a lot of knowledge. So I have learned a lot from other people, and I'm glad to pass whatever knowledge I can on to others.
Chet, any shout outs this week? Nope, none from you. And mine goes to my nemesis, Abla-4-Life at the top of the Guru leaderboards. Honestly, doing pretty well. 23 games completed, 12 games won, so 52% win rate, but has played more games than basically everyone else combined. So that's an area that I'm going to have to... I've got my 80% win rate, but it's only a sample size of 5. So if I can get up to 23 games with that kind of hit rate, I'll be doing good, but that remains to be seen. Yeah, and hopefully everyone else can jump on this BCH Guru leaderboard, because it's more impressive the more people that I'm beating. So come join the bottom of the leaderboard. All right. Thank you all for listening. Until next time.
Reports that more than 500,000 Iraqi children have died as a direct result of U.S. sanctions. It's not just theoretical. These are real people with real lives. 500,000 kids? I'm sorry for shouting, but it just disgusts me what these people's government do. And they do it through central banking and through the control of the money supply, and Bitcoin takes that away from them.
This is the sound of freedom coming out your speakers. Are they playing hide and seek or finders keepers? Let me define my thesis. While they treasonous deep in the malfeasance, a grand deception, 1,000 reasons, keeping the truth out of our reach.